Hello, and welcome to the Inside Writing Podcast. I am your host, Josh Sippie. As a reminder, all of these episodes are recorded live Wednesdays, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can sign up on the Gotham Writers website for free. Now then, on to the show. Today, we're talking with Teodoro Leo. Teddy has a passion for producing new and innovative ways to tell, experience, and consume stories. He's brought his expertise to a diverse set of roles throughout his career, including associate editor at Aftershock Comics and Seismic Press, themed experience designer at TAL Creative, and head chef F&B operations manager at the Lake Mohawk Pool and Spa. Teddy, welcome to the show.
What's up, Josh? Appreciate you having me on. Excited. I'm glad everyone liked the song. Over here, my camera's off, so you couldn't see me. I was like kind of dancing over here, but I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. That's like my hype up song in the morning or when I have to like go do something. So as soon as you were like, oh, what song should you choose? I was like, I know it's the same song I'm choosing. I can't listen to it without getting hyped. So
it works.
Let's just jump into it. Exactly, right? It's always.
So Teddy, you're a fascinating creative professional. You have this self-professed love of finding innovative ways to tell stories, and it's led to so many different, more or less unconventional creative industries. I mean, from comics and hospitality and augmented reality and more. We're going to touch on as many of those as we can, but I told you this is going to be a tough first question, but I want to ask you what you feel like that breaking end point was for you, that moment where you felt like you were really where you wanted to be.
I feel like, so as a kid, all right, so I always do this. Oh, wow, I got it right this time. So there's that book back there, right? My grandfather gave it to me when I was real little, like second grade or something like that. And in it, it's all about Walt Disney's, childhood and his love for story. And it just dives deep into his whole life story and everything. And I grew in like real estate development and on construction sites and everything. So I always was around and watching my dad like have ideas and then bring them to life. So I always kind of had a bug for creativity. Well, until I read that book, it didn't really connect to me that people got to like create made up stories and, like fantasy stories and adventure. People got to design theme parks. So all these sort of things started being like, whoa, like what is that? Like I have to go do those things. Right. And I would say that I didn't grow up like reading comic books. So for me, I've always, even though I've gotten into the comic industry, my big main dream is to go design theme parks. And I've done, themed entertainment design, but like my big thing is I want to design like the Marvel parks and the Marvel experiences. That's why I got into comics in the first place. So I feel like I haven't made it just because like there's always a part of me like we want to go design those Marvel rides and restaurants and all the different stuff. But on the comic side, I think probably when Mike Martz, our editor-in-chief at Aftershock, basically accepted he lived in the apartment building that I also lived in. So when I found out he had worked at Marvel, I started asking him all questions, obviously. And then he quickly after he moved in, he left to go start Aftershock. And when I found out about this, it was when my girlfriend at the time had broken up with me. So I was like, well, I'm kind of bored. Don't have a lot of stuff going on. Like, let me go like learn about comic books. So, it's what I want to do in theme park design. So I would say when Mike was like, yeah, I'll be willing to teach you about editorial and comic books and everything. That was kind of like my breaking in point. But I don't know, because, I'm always interested in telling different stories and like you kind of started, I just like telling them in different ways and different mediums. For me, I feel like there's always something to break into, some industry, some medium, some, the AR stuff that we're talking about. I haven't yet, I guess. I don't know. I feel like if you decided you've broken in at one point, you kind of stop yourself from exploring other options in the future. So.
No, I like that philosophy that if you've already broken in, it sort of limits you to breaking in more in the future. But so I want to rewind even further because specifically to the comic book side now. So you weren't always somebody who read comic books. When was it something that you thought, when did you see them and think that's something I want to do? Like, was there that sort of moment where it's like, oh, I could do this. I could be really good at this.
Yeah, well, kind of. It started with the movies for me. Mm-hmm. That's where I first got introduced really to the understanding that those characters were out there. I remember my uncle, he was a Newark detective. Now he's retired and stuff. And he was Newark Police Department up in Jersey, where I'm from. And he would always bring bootleg movies over on like Saturday nights and like over the weekend and stuff. And we would always watch them. I remember he brought a copy of Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie. And he was like, yeah, this is a Marvel thing. I used to read comics when I was like younger. I think you'll really like this. Like, this is the movie we're going to watch tonight. And I remember everyone kind of being like, I don't know, it's a comic book thing. Like, is it going to be that good and stuff? And he's like, no, it's really good. Like, let's watch it. If it's bad, like, we'll just turn it off. And I remember like, it felt like 3 seconds went by and all of a sudden it was the end of the movie. And I was like, what is this? Like, can I know more about this? And he was like, yeah, they're apparently trying to do this like whole cinematic universe type thing, you know, like maybe it'll work. And from that point on, I was like, I need to know more about this. So that's when I started looking up about comics, about Marvel. But when I watched Captain America, that was the character for me that just connected. I love Captain America. I mean, you can't really see it because most of my Captain America stuff is all in my desk or in my room and whatever. But that's my favorite character. So when I saw that movie, I was like, okay, now I really need to know about this. And then Disney bought Marvel. So that's when it really kind of changed for me, because as someone who wanted to work, still wants to go work at Walt Disney Imagineering, which is their design firm, I thought, okay, it's super competitive to get in there. What's a way to differentiate myself from other people who will be applying? Now, this was when like I was in about 5th, 6th grade when this was happening. And I thought, okay, by the time I graduate college, like they should be building these rides if this MCU thing works out. And unfortunately, I didn't plan that there was gonna be a global pandemic when I graduated college, but whatever, that's can't plan for everything. So that's when I was like, okay, I need to go start learning about comic books. And it just so happened that up in Jersey, I lived pretty close, about a few towns over from the Joe Kubert School. So that's when I first got introduced to actually like real print, how the medium works, you know, learning from artists and stuff. I had Fernando Ruiz as my teacher at Saturday classes. And he was on like the Artist for Archie and stuff. So I would watch him create these comics, and then he would bring in copies. And I remember my first comic that I bought was one of his. He had done like 4 special issues for a wrap up of one of the arcs at the time. And it was like a big milestone thing. And I was like, Mom, like I have to buy this. Like, can I buy this? I don't know where to buy it. I remember I bought it on eBay because I didn't really understand comic book shops or anything like that. So that's kind of how I got into comic books. And then I remember in the Kubert School thinking, okay, I'm never going to work in this industry, because 2 kids were having a little fist fight about I think it was Batman and like Iron Man, like who was stronger. And I thought, whoa, these guys are like serious. Like, I don't know if I want to work in that. And I kind of left it, but I always thought, all right, Marvel Comics, and I continued with the movies and stuff. And then once Mike moved in to the apartment building and he was creating Aftershock with, you know, Joe Pruitt and all of them, I was like, well, listen, like what's the odds that someone who just, you know, was like a legend in the industry, basically, is living in the same apartment building, is going to start this business now that's trying to do something different. Like, I should really go like knock on his door and see if there's an opportunity. So that's kind of how I got into the whole comic side and kind of started first, you know, reading comics. And since then, I mean, I'm always at the comic book store. I have my stuff here. I mean, you can't see, well, you can, I can just move. These are all of my different comic book boxes back here, all stacked behind me. So now it's an addiction that I blame Mike for, honest. So
that's interesting. So you said it was in 4th or 5th grade that you realized what you wanted to do with yourself. Has it always been like a straight path, or has it deviated? Like what sort of things have you run into that have made you reevaluate, or have you?
It's always been, I want to tell stories. That's kind of the main thing. When I was little, I would draw little cartoons. I was big into like political cartoons and stuff. I always thought those were just super simple drawings, but not simple at the same time, right? So I'd always draw those. I would draw little cartoons and stuff. And yeah, so 2nd grade is when I got that book. So that's when it clicked to me. I was like, oh, I could take my understanding and because I would like design houses for fun, right? Like my dad had to design like house design software on his computers, and I would like get home from school and literally just design like apartment buildings and homes and stuff, like as a game, right? Just because I was around it. And then I was drawing. So when I found out in that book that people kind of blended the two, the engineering and architecture and the design and the concept work and stuff to build theme parks, I was like, oh, that's perfect. So in second grade, that's when I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And for a long time, I was very focused on all of that, right? Like kind of with blinders on. But I started writing letters to Imagineers, because at the time they didn't have like social media and stuff like that where you could just like DM them, or like I wasn't on LinkedIn. Probably LinkedIn actually wasn't around yet. But so at that point, I would write letters, I'd send them, and like a few months later, an envelope with Walt Disney Imagineering would show up, and I would look at it and be like, oh shit, they responded, and I would read it, and I got some really great ones, like literally from legends in the industry, Tony Baxter and Joe Rody. He's also a legend, but in the comics world, all different people. But Joe Rody specifically, he said, Imagineering is a way of thinking. Don't sell yourself short. Don't be scared to get off the path you're on and go explore over here. Or if an opportunity comes up, take it. He said, you never know when your path might lead to Imagineering, might lead through Imagineering, might lead around Imagineering and onto something else completely that you had no idea. So I've always thought about that. And when Mike moved in and I was sitting at his door to go knock on it to talk to him and stuff, which by the way, he actually wasn't home when I knocked on it, so I had to leave a note. But when I did that, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking Joe Rody saying, you don't know what paths will take you, around it, to it, whatever. So I thought, well, let's go explore this crazy opportunity that I have. And it kind of came back from those things. But again, like I said, I'm always focused on getting to that dream, but I'm not willing to, divert.
So we'll get back to the comic books in a minute, but I want to deviate a little bit and talk about, because you do so many things outside of that as well. And what I find so interesting is, for most of us, like I'm a prose writer. Whenever I have an idea, it goes straight into this specific form. For you, I feel like when you get an idea, what does it look like to you? Like, how do you know how you're going to put it into act? Because it's just, with your plethora of things that you're doing out there, like one that we'll get back to, your augmented reality, like what does an idea look like to you, and how do you know what you're going to do with it?
Honestly, at first, usually it starts because I was around my dad and my parents and stuff, and because they had their own businesses and everything, especially my dad, because he would go search for properties and he would, design stuff. And then I would go on the construction sites and watch him, because he knew how to build stuff. He could be with his guys and tell them how to do it. And not just like lead from a desk, but really be out there on the ground and stuff. I was always fascinated with how he would turn those ideas into reality and stuff. So for me, because I would always draw and stuff, a lot of times my ideas start off with me grabbing like a sketchbook, my iPad. I had like Wacom's back in the day. Now I kind of just use my iPad. And it kind of just starts with sketching, honestly. So like for the Mind Control, which is the AR project you're talking about, Mind Control and AR experience, I wanted to write a book. And at the time I was kind of struggling with anxiety and stuff. And I kind of wanted to create a story that created a character and the universe would go and see themselves in that were struggling with anxiety and depression and stuff like that. So it really started actually as a sketch, right? I was just drawing some characters and I was thinking about stuff. And because at the time I was early working with Mike, I was around scripts. And as a kid and stuff, people would always tell me like, Teddy, you should do creative writing. But I have learned and stuff, so I hated it. I just was like, no, thank you. Don't want to do that. At the time, I only really saw writing as like an essay, and they were boring to me. But what teachers kept telling me is, Teddy, you write is in stories. When I get to your essay, it pulls me through. It's not like a boring essay. You're kind of writing essays wrong, but it's always a fun story, and I give you props. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe I should try this like writing thing. So kind of just depending on the idea, it just goes from there. For that, I started writing, and then because I've been around gaming, because I kind of have that Imagineering way of thinking, which was like, how do you blend technology and storytelling, right? I thought, well, if I'm going to make a comic, like I could probably push it right? Walt Disney always talked about plussing things, right? Like he didn't invent theme parks, but he plussed it, he plussed it to make a theme park, right? Obviously there was amusement parks and everything, but what Disney is now has redefined the industry and what a theme park is and stuff. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to write a comic book, I want to plus it. How do you do that? And I thought, well, kids my age don't really read comic books. I didn't read comic books. Like, how can you do it? I played a lot of games. So that's when I started messing around with ideas and talking to my friends, talking to, different people that had experience into it. And I started building out a team of specialists to, go and do that. Because even though I had an idea for it, one of the places, and it kind of comes back to editorial, is I know you have to have a full-on team with people that are specialists to actually turn those ideas into reality. So it kind of just depends what the idea is. Sometimes it starts as a sketch. Sometimes I have a wall over there. I do like speech writing stuff. It just has quotes and stuff that I thought of that would just be good in speeches, or like lines from comics that I thought were good and stuff. So it kind of just starts with all different, not like, there's no cards around with sketches and stuff. There's things all in my office that an idea can come from anywhere. It's just about trying to figure out what form am I going to put that into. Not sure.
And whenever you come up with these ideas, that's something all creatives have. We always have a surplus of ideas. How do you decide which ones to pursue? Like, do you have to see a road forward for it, or do you just kind of go in with an open mind, just seeing where it goes?
So I kind of go in theme park design stuff. It's kind of like blue sky, right? So there's like that phase of like anything's possible. Let's just throw it out there and see what works. And then once I get an idea that I'm like, okay, that seems like there's legs to it, that's when I really dive deep into it. I do a bunch of research. I do drawings. If I'm going to be building like elevations, what's the regulations there? What's the coding? If it's AR and stuff, like how do you build an AR app? Like look that up and try to figure it out. Talk to people. I'm always books and stuff. So and once I figure out an idea that I think, okay, this has legs to be something, it's all about now let's research and basically R&D it to get to a point of like, okay, I think it's a good idea, but like now let's really test that. Is it out there already? What could fail? What is going to be a challenge and stuff. And that's kind of where it goes next. And then through that process, it then leads to like building out that team to, okay, if I want to do an AR app, these are going to be the hurdles. These are people that can do that. I've learned about these different elements. Let's bring these people onto the team. And then it's really from there, just kind of taking what comes at you and just reacting to it and figuring out until all of a sudden it's a reality. Like the mind control AR experience, that took about two and a half years of just from the initial idea to when it actually came out and people could like use it.
And it's clear from what all the projects you've mentioned that you're always collaborating, which I think is one thing that writers, we always hear writing is a solitary process. It's something that we're not used to doing in groups. So, and this is where we transition to talking more about comic book writing as well, because that's a collaborative process as well. I'm curious, have you always been somebody who collaborates, works better in teams, or was that something you had to acquire as you went?
I think, no, I like my alone time. So I think for writing, you're right. Like when I write and stuff, I usually put my headphones on. Sometimes I don't even have music. Sometimes I literally just put them on. So like, it feels like I'm like in a different space and stuff. A lot of times, like I'll just go for walks and stuff and have scores of music. If I'm in, like, okay, if I'm going to write a fantasy thing, like I'll try to get into that space, like music from, a game or something that was kind of the same genre or something like that. But oftentimes I've found that I like working with specialists and building out those teams. And I feel like a lot of people in different careers, especially in the creative, if they work in some creative element, kind of all speak the same. They're all trying to say the same thing. They just speak a different language, right? So like an artist might be trying to say the same thing as an engineer is, but they have different terms to get there. So I always enjoy learning those terms and just learning in general, but then trying to kind of bring that team together and translate it for everyone. And here's the vision, and this is what we're going to do. And, oh, that's a good idea. Like, can you go work with that person and come, like, kind of R&D that out, and then come back and maybe we could pull it into on this thing. And comic books, you're right, because you do have a team, right? You have obviously the comic book writer, you have the artist, the colorist, the letterer, editors you're working with, book production, logo people, even when you get further than that, like film and TV team and social media and marketing, all that different stuff. But that like initial creative team is really the writer and artist and colorist, letterer, and the editors. So even though it is a very personal experience when you're writing, you also have to be willing and able to accept that an editor is going to read your script and dig into it and leave notes, right? An artist, they're a specialist, right? They know how to bring comic book scripts to life. And a lot of times artists or writers sometimes might push back because they have a certain vision. But oftentimes, like I'll tell comic book writers, hey, even though you have an eye for this, like don't be afraid to let the artist change it or tweak it because they really know how to, place it on the page and really bring it to life. So yeah, it's definitely a more personal, the actual script writing, right? Because you might be, it's like 3:00 in the morning and you're doing it by yourself on your laptop on your couch or something. But once it then gets to the, okay, we have to bring this to life, it kind of, builds out the team.
And then I want to go into more of, because I know for, again, a lot of writers, the collaboration is something that's going to be new to them. So from your experience, both as a writer and from the editor side, what can writers expect when they start entering this world of knowing that there's going to be more pieces to it? It's not just you write the book, you send it out there. There's so many layers to it. Kind of an open-ended question here, but what should writers be expected to encounter, to do? What's their workload going to look like?
Revisions, which, I feel like as a writer, you already do that, right? Like and when I write, I throw words on a page. I'm like, all right, get it out of my head. It's all up here. Just get it onto a page so I can remember things. And then it's like, well, let me go back and continue and almost like clay, right? Like you kind of do the first model and it's rough and everything. Then you go back and continue, and all of a sudden, you have a masterpiece. I hope you're good at that. So I feel like you're definitely going to have revisions, but you also have to be willing to work in that team to get that feedback from an editor to be like, hey, this character is not working, or hey, you're missing, like a secondary story arc or a character. There's like, why are they doing this? Why are they going on this road trip? Something's missing. There's no actual reason, or there's this plot that you should try to fix, or different. So as long as you're open to that, and willing, it's similar to really anything in life. If you're willing to listen to people, you can get better. And if you're not, it's going to be a pretty tough life for you. So, as long as you're willing to, listen to people and listen to those editors and listen to your artists of like, hey, you have this as 2 panels, but I actually can get it in one, and it gives us more space down here. And, it should be pretty easy.
And I want to explore the ways, because, you can be a writer all you want. You still have to get that team around you. So I want to talk with you, and we were talking about this before we launched as well, of the different ways you can get into comic book writing, the different ways your story can get out there. Because, unlike traditional publishing where you get an agent, they sell your book, or you self-publish. Those are essentially the ways you do it. With comic book writing, there are lots of ways to get into the industry. And I was hoping you could just speak to that, like the different ways people can take to, because again, there is no right way to do it.
Yeah. So, you talk about, agents and stuff, that's kind of coming online even more, especially as comic books have become more part of pop culture and people have seen the money that can be made in them. So, we have artists and stuff that have agents, we have writers that have agents and everything. So that's always a way to get into it. But I think honestly, similar to almost politics, where a lot of times you have to be on the ground and talking to people and shaking hands and stuff, it kind of comes back to that, right? You never know when a connection or relationship or whatever might lead to, hey, I have a story idea. Can I send it to you? So my biggest recommendation is a lot of times it starts at conventions. active in different communities. Obviously, social media has allowed communities to pop up all over the place, going to events and stuff, going out and, webtoon, digital comics and everything, being able to self-publish, using Kickstarter to get a book off the ground, directly, sending an idea you have. I use Kickstarter for mind control, right? And I send it directly to backers. There's a lot of smaller publishers or printers out there that get your book made. I think the biggest thing is those connections and also just getting your work out there. I always tell this to people that as an editor, I don't know you exist unless you're out there talking and, on the con floor or, in this panel or, emailing me, or I see you active in a community or coming up to me or sending a picture or anything like that. Or if I, read your book or if I find it on Kickstarter or something like that. So the biggest thing is just being out there and talking and just creating a thing of a body of work that you can share, even if you don't get it made, like on a writer, right? Even if you don't have the artists or the finances to actually make a book made, you can do short stories. Like I love trying to do like, can I tell a comic book story in like 3 pages, or what story can I say in a page, right? And you might be able to find an artist that will be willing to do that for, like $100 here, $150 here, $80 here, depending. So you could kind of test yourself. And then again, those scripts and having that kind of body of work for like a portfolio and stuff, again, allows you to have something to share when you then go meet people and make connections, at conventions, wherever, social media, stuff like that.
So say you are a comic book writer, you have these scripts and you don't know, should I be pitching editors? Should I be going on Kickstarter? Should I be, hiring my own team? How do you know what's right for you or what the right path to take is?
That's a tough one, because it really comes down to what your vision is for the project, what you see it as. Mind control, I knew, not at first, kind of took a few years to realize that mind control wasn't going to be some long story arc, right? The original idea was in 3 notebooks. So it was about 500 pages of script that I had, did in these notebooks. And it got condensed to about 1 issue. I have a second issue made, but I kind of pulled the plug on it, right? Because there's at a certain point you have to realize, is this a portfolio project? Is this more of a learning thing? Is this an R&D thing? Do you want this to be a long series? Do you want this to be a short series? Do you want to own all of it? So you have to kind of assess, right? So if it's just a script that you just want to mess around with, like just jump on whatever, Word or, Pages, whatever you have, and write the script, just get it out of your head, right? If you want to pitch it, like look up how to make pitches and stuff, like how to pitch a comic book. At Aftershock, we have usually we like 1 to 2 pages that kind of just a log line and kind of like an issue breakdown. It's nothing big. You don't need an artist. Oftentimes I really like when a pitch gets to us in like early stages. Obviously not the earliest stages. It needs to be an actual story, it can't just be an idea, but, we like that because then we can build out the creative team and stuff, but it's kind of such a personal thing because you kind of have to figure out what is that story to you, right? Do you want it to be that big thing? Do you want to own it? Do you want to whatever? You have to know, like, if I do something at Marvel, obviously you're using Marvel characters. If you work there, you're writing their stories. They're not your stories. At Aftershock, we're creator owned, right? So we put up the money, all the creative costs. And because of that, we split the rights 50-50 for, film and TV and all different stuff like that. Image, for example, they're also creator owned, but the creators put up all the creative costs. So, you kind of have to go out there and explore and kind of figure out what's the best place to tell your story. Is it Webtoon? Can you just put it up there, find an artist and upload it yourself and build up a following? Is it just posting short comics on your Instagram and building up a following there? Is it, talking to an editor? Is it going on Kickstarter? Is it going to work for Marvel? Stuff like that.
So, because again, since we're talking about breaking in, I want to sort of suss out what is, how many pitches do you get, and what is the likelihood that somebody who doesn't have a portfolio out there can sort of break in through that usual way, or essentially most of the people that you see that are breaking in, do they already have stuff out there?
oftentimes they have samples, right? That one of the biggest things, if on our creative meeting and stuff, if people don't recognize the name or something, one of the first questions is there samples? Is there comic book script samples? Is there something we could read? So we can really kind of understand how they tell stories, what their like language is when they tell stories. So that's one of the biggest things, right? Those having samples and having things that you can actually share on top of to back up your pitch allows an editor and people making those decisions the ability to say like, oh, okay, I can see their idea, I get it, but I can also see with this portfolio, like they've been able to execute it. That's one of the biggest things, right? Is your idea going to be actually executed on? And the only way we can really figure that out is if you do have those samples. Now, obviously some artists, right? We're working on a book with Jim Starlin and everything. Obviously he has a lot of samples, creator of Thanos and Gamora and pretty much the cosmic Marvel world. But like obviously he has samples, but that doesn't mean it needs to be those samples, right? It's just, do you have something that we can look at and be like, okay, like let's take the risk on this person. This person has the guts and has the good script and has the techniques and stuff. And even sometimes, and we have the capabilities at editorial to guide them and teach them, and they're willing to listen to feedback and talk to us. And that's really where it comes down to, especially at After Stuff, because we're so creator focused. It's really about, is there going to be that partnership there? Are they going to listen? Are we going to listen to them? So for us, it's super important. But again, different all over the place.
So speaking to you, as you're an associate editor, so you are a gatekeeper of the industry. You hear pitches, you pick ones you like, and you move on with them. So I want to sort of hit this from different angles. First off, what is it that you look for in a pitch when it comes to you? What makes you say, ooh, that one's good?
That's a tough one. To be honest, I just look for good stories. A lot of people always be like, oh, what's the genre? What's your genre or something? I'm more into is actually a good story. Are there obstacles that the characters have to overcome? Is there good characters? Is there, emotional pull on it? Do you feel for the characters, what they're going through? Does it make sense what quest they're about to go on? So all those kind of like basic techniques, but you have that extra level. They're like, this story needs to be told, right? Even we always say, and Mike always says it a lot, pretty much all stories have been told. It's just about telling them in new ways and telling them for the time we live in, right? So for me, it's just, does a story, do I think is it like, this needs to be told? Like we have to tell this, we need to get this out there. And obviously that comes in all different genres. I mean, if you look at the Aftershock lineup, we have stuff across horror and fantasy and comedy and, more serious books, more just, we have a book, Chicken Devil, where literally a guy dressed up as a chicken costume and kind of kills the Russian mob and stuff. Not kind of, totally murders the Russian mob in a revenge thing. And it's insane, right? It's hilarious. It's also crazy. But like, we're always just looking for a good story. So at the end of the day, when we're looking for stories, when I'm looking for stories, does it make me laugh? Did it make me cry? Did it make me, be like, damn, it's been 4 days since I read that and I'm still thinking about it? Stuff like that. That's what's going to get my attention and a lot of editors out there.
And is it just the writing that gets your attention, or do you have to see a visual component with it? Like, I assume the pitches don't always include art. So do you have to have an idea of where that art's going to take it?
Sometimes we have pitches that are just like Word documents. So maybe, most of the time it's like Times New Roman and everything. That's what we're looking at. Font 12. Sometimes people get creative and they use fonts that might, be cool for the story they're telling or whatever. Sometimes we have pitches that will have some concept art for the characters, or sometimes people will just put together like mood boards of pictures that they find on Google to kind of give you a sense of the world and place. Other times we have stories that might have 3 or 4 pages of art actually done and lettered for us to review. But for us, I think as an editor and stuff, and as someone who's creative, if you're telling your story correctly, people should automatically start to see it, right? Like when people were reading the Harry Potter books before there was movies and theme parks and everything, right? People fell in love with it because everyone got to create a world that they escaped to in their mind. So when we're reading pictures, it's the same thing, right? We're creating that world. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of people on our creative team. So on a single time, there might be like 12 of us reviewing pictures and sending our grades and stuff. And there's going to be a different version of how we see it, right? The specifics and the little details. But if you're telling it, if your pitch is really kind of focused on what the story actually is, we'll be able to be like, hey, you know what? That artist that was on this book will probably kill it on this one. Or, hey, I saw that guy, or I met that woman at that convention and I saw her style, and that could really match up here. So, it doesn't have to have art, but it doesn't hurt. It kind of just depends on what you think your pitch needs. There's some stories that will say, oh, this is a story that like needs some visuals to back it up. You just kind of have to play it by ear and kind of figure out for your pitch and your story.
So what role do you play as an editor? Say you like a pitch, what happens next? Is it like green light, full speed ahead, it's getting made, or do you have to take it to somebody, or what happens after you like a pitch?
Yeah. So Aftershock, we have a system, right, on Wednesdays today, actually. We have at 12 p.m. Eastern time, we have our creative meeting. So each week on Friday, the previous Friday, we'll get a bunch of pitches from Ryan, who's the head of our kind of finding pitches and just in charge of collecting all that and putting it together and tracking and talking to artists and stuff. He'll send us, these are the pitches this week we're reviewing. This is the creator. This is the Dropbox link. These are where all the assets are for those specific things. Get me your notes and your grade back before Wednesday. Our grade system is like a stoplight, right? So it's red, yellow, green. And by that, once you give a color, it then equates to a number percentage. And some people on our team have a higher overall weighted grade just because they're higher up in the company. So like for me, right, like I'm always talking to creators and stuff and writers and stuff. So if I get a pitch and I'm like, hey, this is really cool. Sometimes I might, oh, this is cool. And I'll work with them on the side and be like, hey, tweak this, do this. Or we kind of already got this pitch. Do you have something else recently we greenlit this, or something's already in the pipeline that I can't talk about, but like, pitch something else because you're a good writer. So if I get it, then I'll send it to Mike, Marks, Christina, and Ryan, right? And then it's, okay, do we think it's good? Yes. Okay, then let's put it into that creative meeting. Then in that creative meeting, all of us, right? So it's like 12, 15 of us or something that has a grade. We put all of our stuff in there. And at the end of it, once we do all the, adding up and everything, it'll say what the percentage is. And we have like a gold medalist, silver, bronze winner of the week. And that's where we decide of like, okay, we sent in our notes, let's get in the call. And then on Zoom, we'll talk about it, right? Sometimes we have some really crazy debates. Be like, no, you're not seeing it. Like, this is what this is. There's a lot of projects that, we get pretty into, and we'll go defend it and be like, no, you guys are missing something. Like this is what it is. And that's kind of what happens on the meeting. It's just us going back and forth, saying what we believe about it, going up for bat for it if we feel like it's not getting the right attention or whatever. And we also have we have our film and TV side, we have people from marketing, we have people from all across industry with all different backgrounds and stuff, which allows us to really understand it's not just a bunch of people that look like me in there, right? Being like, well, I don't like stories that are about 14, 26-year-old girls just talking about drama because like that's not my story, whatever, right? No, we have all sort of people in there that are going in and reviewing these things, and we're talking about it and debating them. And then at the end of the day, that's when we're like, okay, this is the one we're gonna ask back for an expanded outline. We want to go, we like this writer, but these pitches aren't it. So let's ask for more pitches. This pitch we're going to pass on. This pitch we're going to, we think we're going to greenlight it, but let's just talk to the writer one more time to get something clarified. We'll send people back notes and be like, hey, we like this, but can you change these things? And we'll re-review. And then that's where we decide like, okay, this is greenlit. Then it comes to editorial. That's where we then take it on as our baby and shepherd it through the whole creative process.
And then because I have to ask, are there any red lights, like immediate no, that like you've seen a pitch, you're like, oh, that's never going to happen. Like I know for a lot of writers, it's always like you want to stand out from the crowd. So sometimes you feel like you have to take chances. But what are some chances you should never take? What are some red flags that you should never do in a pitch?
I will say that the biggest thing, I think a lot of people, and just because you have a pitch and you send it out and you're like, hey, you know what, Aftershock might be a good spot for this, right? Like I was talking about Chicken Devil before, right? Guy, chicken soup, goes out, murders, whatever. Now, yeah, crazy, right? Now, if you send that pitch to us and you're like, yeah, there's gonna be a guy in a bunny suit and he's killing, this mob. You're like, did you look at our lineup? Like we already have that story, right? We already have a character, we've done that. So that's one of the biggest things, one of the things I've seen where people kind of forget to look at a publisher or just a company in general, what's in their lineup already. Sometimes it's a no quickly just because we're like, oh, we greenlit that last week. Like today on our call, we're like, man, like if this story came in sooner, maybe we'd have greenlit this, but it's so similar now to that one we greenlit a few weeks ago. And then there's a lot of times where we just say no, just because we're like, like right now, one of the things we've been getting a lot is like multiverse stories. But like obviously Marvel right now kind of has that unlocked, right? You can't even. I wish I can compete against them, but they really have the multiverse on a different. So like there's certain things you can just see happen in the world that all of a sudden you'll get pitches that kind of reflect that, and you're like, oh man, like this week we got 100 multiverse movies because the new Spider-Man came out, or this week we got a bunch of war stories, right? Or people fleeing something, right? And because there's stuff going on in the world that people are seeing and it's affecting them, and now they have a story idea that they want to tell. So a lot of times there's elements like that where it's just like, oh, we pitched something like that, or that already came in, or we already created that. So I just look at what the publisher already published. I would say that's one of the biggest things to do.
So I'm going to pause my questions for a bit and get to some audience questions. So first question, Teddy, kudos for your willingness to create a comic with a hero/heroine suffering with anxiety and depression. Did you complete this work? And if yes, what is the title?
So the first one, I created the first and technically the second issue, to be honest, but I never published the second one just because financials of comics are wild. And I did that when I was in high school. So the first one you can read actually on Webtoon. The first issue is up on Webtoon. If you just look up Mind Control, it's up there. And you could kind of get an idea of the world that I was creating. Just because how I am, I'm always thinking about like, how can I go back to that universe in different ways, right? Could I explore it in a video game? Can I explore it in TV show, an animated thing? Can I get back there in a few years to kind of finish the story? One of the things that I noticed when I was writing it, because I had done it so long ago, was there's almost, in the version that I first started, there's no real story, right? Like now I talk about like, what's the obstacles, what's the thing, like why are they going on this? So I'm always, if I go back, I kind of have to go back with all the knowledge I have learned now to be like, okay, what's the actual story here? But yeah, if you want to read the first one, it's up on Webtoon. Just look up Mind Control. It should pop up. It has should look like this. That's what you'll see. Yeah, definitely check it out. It's up there.
We'll include links to that in the show notes after the show, so anyone that does want to check it out can. Next question, Teddy, do you see your characters visually or verbally, or a combination of both?
Good question. I think both. Because I first got in the industry and the first thing I did was always just draw since I was a kid. I immediately see the characters and world in my head. But then very quickly after that, I start figuring out, and it's probably more the writer side coming in, if it's like, what's the voice of that character, right? What they've been through and everything. And then that obviously comes out. Can't really, Well, I mean, I can draw that. Sometimes I'll just draw some words and thing, but that's when it kind of shifts and be like, okay, I have to start writing this to figure out the character. But it's kind of both. I kind of merge the two. Like I'll do sketches to kind of figure out stuff, and then jump to writing and kind of flesh it out there again. And so both, I guess. Easy answer that didn't answer anything.
I don't know how I haven't asked this yet, but with how many different projects you have going on, how do you manage your time, and how do you manage projects? Like, do you work on more than one at once, or do you kind of one all the way to completion, then move on to the next one? So
for like comics and stuff at Aftershock, we have like a bunch at all times in the pipeline, right? When we greenlight stuff on Wednesday, it gets put into the pipeline, and the pipeline doesn't end, right? When you send out a book, like today yesterday we sent books out, sent like 4 or 5 books out to press, right? We finish those, and there's books right behind that we're also working on. So a lot of it is figuring out, okay, what is priority? What books are going out, tomorrow? What books are going out? What assets need to be in? Who do I have to send the assets to? Who do I need to check in? Who missed a deadline and I have to reprimand them in a nice way? Different stuff like that. And then if it's on more of like the theme entertainment stuff and building stuff and stuff like that, it's oftentimes working a project out through that R&D and getting to its space. And it's like, okay, it's at the point where you either do this or you don't, because you've realized either the financials, I have to like raise money and capital, or I have to do these things, or it doesn't work. Like we fleshed it out, we've gone through the thing, and it actually, cool idea, but we missed the opportunity, or it doesn't work, whatever. So that's kind of on that side. It's kind of working through and staying kind of focused on one thing. But in comics, it's more of like, okay, the project's ongoing. What's more the priority items? What stuff I can do on Monday morning? What stuff I need to do right now? Stuff like that.
So one question I always love to ask, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say, because for writers, we suffer from writer's block. I'm sure you get it too. What sort of ways do you approach, I guess I would call it creative block, because you aren't just a writer, you do all these other things as well. What happens when you hit that creative block, especially if you're on a deadline or something? How do you overcome it?
For me, if I'm just like crashing and stuff, oftentimes I'll just step away, right? Now, if there's a deadline and everything, if it's like, oh, I have to get this at this certain time, whatever, working up against, a time and date. Because I am a nut about time management stuff, just because of my job and trying to balance things out, oftentimes I try to give myself a runway, right, to land a question plane if I need to. So it kind of depends. If I'm really stuck and I have the time, I'll, just get away from my computer, get away from my iPad, go for a walk, go play some video games, hang out with my, loved ones and stuff, to try to just, escape it for a little bit and get back to it. Oftentimes I found kind of escaping to other creative things, or using your creativity to do something that you're not like, you have to do, kind of unbreaks the creative block. So, if I'm struggling with like designing a character for something, I'll just start drawing something else. And then all of a sudden it kind of just comes back to me, and I'm like, okay, let me go back to that character. And if I'm up against a deadline and stuff, oftentimes it's kind of making sure that I've given myself enough time that I can have that like frustration, be like, what's happening right now? I can't figure out why I can't get this on the page, or what's happening, or how to fix this. Sometimes though, it's just, you got to accept defeat and come back and fight the next day and just regroup and try to re-strategize on some things, which takes a lot, right? To be like, yep, this is failing. But definitely, if you do it correctly, it's definitely worth the time to be like, all right, this is bust. Like, I get out of here.
So how do you know when a project is failing? Whenever it's like just done, you can't resuscitate it. How do you know? Because, most projects are going to hit walls. They're going to run into obstacles, and you kind of have to make that choice of, do you keep going with it, or do you just let it go? How do you make that decision?
It's tough, right? Especially because as creatives and stuff, you put so much into a story, into a creative thing you're building, or, an idea, whatever it is. It's hard. oftentimes you know it, right? In like the back of your mind, but you're like, nah, that's not true. And you keep going, right? So it might take you a few weeks, might take you a few months, a few years, right? The sooner you can accept it and not look at it as a failure, right? Instead of, a lot of people look at failure as like a period at the end of the sentence, instead of just looking at it as like a comma, right? So for like Mind Control, even though we got the first one, it took a few years, we got it out to people, we didn't get the backing we needed to go continue the series throughout, right? And that's, but the world's reality comes down to it of like, you need finances, you need money, you need, creators have to get paid, right? They're not doing this for exposure. So these different things, right? You need to start doing that. And as like the project lead, as the person that it's your baby and stuff and whatever, it's hard to like pull the plug. But like I said before, is Mind Control a failure? No, because the experience I got from that, the experience about building that team, creating the AR thing, it's great for the portfolio, right? It's a great experience in general to have. And I'm always thinking about ways to go back to it. Maybe it'll be in this format or this thing, or maybe down the line when there's, a better market for it, or there's more money or whatever in my bank account that I can dedicate to it and stuff like that. You can do those things. But it's tough to pull the plug on those elements. But I think if the first way to start coming to terms with that is not seeing it as a failure, but okay, this project was more of a R&D for myself, or a thing that I got better at, right? Now I can use these skills and these where I took missteps on this side. Now the project, I'm not going to do that because now I know what to do. So yeah, if you kind of change your mentality, I think it's easier to pull the plug when something's not working anymore.
So I'm going to get two more questions in here. Our parting questions. The first one is, if you could give one piece of advice to people out there that are trying to break in, either to comics or to something in general, what would that piece of advice be?
So I like to say this a lot, which is not everyone could be a comic book artist. So I'll say not everyone could be a comic book writer, right? So many people that want to be in these jobs, and that not everyone can be a blank. Fill it in with whatever you do or whatever, right? If you want to be a musician, everyone can't be The Weeknd or some major artist, stuff like that. But oftentimes, and I say this a lot, not everyone can't be a comic book writer, comic book artist, but almost anyone can work in the comic book industry. You can be in the field, you can be around this and be part of that thing that you love so much, but you have to come to terms of, okay, maybe this specific thing, I am not the level that I need to be to do it at a professional level, right? Like I used to box all the time, love it. Would I want to get in a ring with like a real professional? Hell no, that would be scary as hell. Not a good idea, right? I could do a pretty good job, but not with a professional, right? So you have to come to terms with that and figure it out. But like I said, like in comic books, like I work with writers all day long, right? I give story notes. I work with our artists. I work with our marketing team, social media, film and TV. So there's so many, especially now as comics has exploded, and a lot of industries across the board, honestly, have so many roles that you can play, right? Like, just an unlimited, just so many roles, right? So don't be afraid to get your foot in the door in an industry, in a role that you're like, well, this isn't a comic book writer, but okay, I'm a comic book editor. I know how to write. I can use my talents to talk to the writers, right? I can use my creative side. Like I said before, we're kind of all say the same thing, but we're saying it in a different language. You can be that person that translate it. Obviously, write all the time, continue to, chase it down, your dreams and stuff, and get yourself out there, talk to editors, put out your work. Because again, like I said earlier, we don't know you exist if you're not out there talking and speaking up and sharing your work. But it doesn't mean that if you don't get that one job that you've always dreamed about, it doesn't mean that it's a failure, right? You can work in the industry and be a part of it, and be a different side. Kind of like what Joe Rohde told me a long time ago. It might lead to it might lead through it, might lead around it. Don't be afraid of that journey, and don't be afraid to like take those paths.
And then last but not least, where can people find you? Are you online? Do you have social media? And what do you have to promote?
Yeah. So first thing, definitely go check out Aftershock Comics, all of our comics and everything. If you go to aftershockcomics.com, all of our stuff there. We have all of our social medias out there. If you just look us up, you'll find us. Today, actually, We Live, which is our most popular series, the second arc of We Live came out. We have 2 separate #1 issues. We Live #1 black, We Live #1 white, and those 2 stories are separate, but at the end kind of come together, and it then goes out into issue 2, 3, and 4, and 5 as the next arc. So definitely check that out, because that is a great story that you don't want to miss if you're into comic books. Next, I also have my own podcast. So if you want kind of more behind the scenes and learn how other people have gotten into their creative industry, if you can't get enough of this sort of content, just look up It's Gotta Be Creative. You'll find it. And then lastly, for myself, I'm big, my friends always make fun of me. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I think it's like the best social media, honestly, we have. So yeah, if you just look up Teodoro Leo, Teodoro Leo on LinkedIn, you'll see me. I'll pop up. Same with Instagram. My Instagram's at Teodoro A Leo. And then my website, if you want to check out more of my work or get all the contact info and all that sort of stuff, you can just look up teodoroaleo.com. I used my name to make it easy. And then if you have pitches and stories, or if you want to talk or whatever, definitely just send me an email, teodoroaleo@gmail.com. Because like I said, I don't know if you're out there as an editor, if you don't show me your pitches and kind of make a connection. So for sure, I'm always down to talk to writers and find new talent and stuff. So, definitely hit me up.
Well, Teddy, we're out of time. Thank you so much for this. Was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm glad Noel kind of linked this up here, because I've been looking forward to this all day.
Absolutely. So to all of our listeners, thank you for being here. We are back next week, same time, same place, with Chantel V. Johnson. Her debut book just came out. So we'll see you then. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.